Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, my name is Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. First, I would like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcast space. We're joined here today by Dave Preiss of Launch. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. So tell us a little bit about yourself and Launch.
I started the company coming out of Home Depot about 7 years ago with my co-founder, Javier. We basically were just kind of bumping into each other in the hallways, and he told me he was leaving. I said, where are you going? He's like, I don't know. I'm just going to start a company. And I was like, what is it going to be? He's like, I don't know. I was like, all right, I'll come with you.
Nice.
And that was basically it. And in 3 weeks, we quit.
Was this like the Jerry Maguire scene at Home Depot? You know, who's coming with me?
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't quite like that. We kind of went in and resigned together, and it was nothing against them, but we just needed to scratch that itch of entrepreneurship, because he and I had both been doing corporate for 14 years by that time. So we got started late compared to the whippersnappers that are starting these things at 19 or something. So yeah, we started up. We really didn't know what we wanted to do. We come from an agency background as well as in-house, so we went with agency to give us some kind of salary, and it was just me and him, really, just like a tag team, freelance team. And we started up another business while we were doing that. That was going to be, like the thing.
Yeah.
And I won't go into it too much because it's complicated. Well, it was boom boxes. I'll just say that.
Okay.
It was boom boxes.
Got it.
So they were popular. They got, as far as, we had no ad spend, and they got kind of popular. So we thought we really had something, but we weren't making any money. So about a year and a half of that, and then we were like, we've got to just put a stake in the ground and pick one thing and just put all our effort into it instead of splitting effort. So we, made our first hire, and that's when I think we really became Launch, when we made that first hire of Heidi Williams. So. Yeah.
Total random thought, but my youngest son, he's 10, has a Nerf stereo that has a CD player in the top.
Yeah.
And we happen to still have some CDs lying around, and they're over by some other things that we have on our entertainment center. And we're like, oh, well, you just take one of those CDs and you put it in the top. And he's like, one of these? And he reaches over and grabs one of the records. So I'm like, does that look like it's going to fit? No, I mean, it was the square case, so he doesn't know what was inside of it or anything. And I'm like, no, it's the CDs over there, right? So we had to go through the difference between this record and where that goes and where a CD goes. And it was like, wow, this is a learning moment.
And I thought records were back now.
Right,
so,
they are. I think they are. We have a few ourselves. So Home Depot, I've worked for my share of Fortune 500s. Mm-hmm. Know that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a kind of a startup kind of person, whether that's a small startup or a funded startup, whatever it might be. I love that atmosphere. So what's the difference in the feel from a culture perspective coming from Home Depot and now doing a startup at that time?
Well, I had been in a number of other places as well, like Turner and bigger agencies like Razorfish before they were Sapient Razorfish Nitro Publicis or whatever. So I had kind of gotten a tour of what it's like to work at different large corporations. And when they're that big, I mean, for example, my wife still works at Home Depot, and she's having her holiday party, and it's really just a sub-segment of, it's just like the 20 people she works with. So even though there's like 10,000 people, like it really comes down to, there's
like
a small
200
company.
other parties happening.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So they even strive to try to get some sort of small company feel in there sometimes. And, but you just find out like how hard it is to try to make a culture happen at a big company like that. There's a lot more bureaucracy going on. But culture is essential because it's really hard to. It's hard for an organization to manage itself all the way down from the CEO all the way around to the person on the floor wearing the apron.
Right.
So I think they recognize that culture is important because what you want out of a culture, if you're a business, is that everybody is doing the right thing even when nobody's looking, because you don't want to have to be looking all the time.
Right.
So
you don't have time to do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah.
And that's really going to make a company thrive a lot better than trying to do some sort of top-down approach where everybody's going to be Six Sigma all the way down. I mean, that works for like the machine bureaucracy, but for like professional organizations where it's more of an ad hocracy and people have to be adaptive and think on their feet and be creative, and it's not a prescribed thing that you do every day, then you actually have to have a culture that gives people the empowerment to make their own decisions and to generally do the right thing from a principle perspective, So.
Yeah, definitely. So out of those experiences you've had where, you're at places, hopefully where people were empowered to do the right thing, you were at Turner, your Home Depot, what was the most memorable positive culture experience that you've had?
Well, they kind of weren't always empowered to do the right thing. I don't want to bang on those bigger companies, but
okay.
That was, it wasn't the sole reason why me and Javier started Launch. But one of the reasons was we wanted to work at the kind of company we've always wanted to work for. So that's how it started when it was just two of us and then 3 and 4.
Yeah.
It was that basic. Like, we just kind of want to work at the place we've always wanted to work for because everything was always kind of broken, and I don't begrudge anybody for being kind of broken because, the dirty little secret of all companies, no matter how successful they are, is they're all a little bit broken
right.
on the inside.
Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, we wanted to see if we could make it our own way, and then there is an advantage to starting from scratch with that. Yeah.
And do you feel like you've gotten there, or is it very much still in construction?
Yeah, so wherever there is, I don't think we've gotten there, and I don't know that anybody is ever there. It's like really kind of a journey that you're always on. But we have made a lot of progress, and a lot of it was just us kind of figuring out like that the simple approach that we had in the beginning wasn't going to work anymore when we got bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're 5 people, it's like a flat organization. 8 people, 10 people, flat. You don't really need performance management. You don't really need.
You can still get anything. One table at a restaurant.
Yeah,
right? Like
right.
You can get everybody together.
Yeah, you don't need those things. It starts to change just as soon as you begin to get any kind of a hierarchy going. And I can't really explain why, but something starts to change, and then you realize like, oh well, culture isn't actually just about like, let's go and have some parties like holiday party or go do picnics and free lunches and stuff. It's not really, and it's not even just about like, hey everybody, you have freedom to work from home, you have amazing benefits, like we're just going to give you all these things and you can enjoy them and just work is fun and you don't have to worry so much. Like, that's not really it by itself anyway.
Yeah.
There needs to be sort of a healthy energy, a healthy sort of stress and challenge that is applied throughout the organization. And we realized at some certain point, like, we weren't getting the kind of like employee satisfaction results that we were looking for because that part was kind of lacking. We didn't really have a performance review structure. We kind of like shunned it for a while because I think one of my least favorite things throughout my corporate journey was the performance review system. Like
Right.
I detested writing a self-evaluation. I detested being reviewed. I didn't really detest reviewing other people, but I didn't exactly enjoy it.
Yeah.
At the time, and that's because performance management is really hard to do well. And at big companies, even with large HR staffs, it's really hard to develop a system that works really well. But if you don't have one, the only thing worse than not having one is, the only thing worse than having one is not having
Right.
one. Right.
Yeah.
So we started to install that and really dedicate the time and investment into that, and did a lot of research to figure out how to do it well. And we're on that journey right now. We're making really good progress with that, and it's already had an effect in the last 5-6 months that we've been doing it.
And so far, what would you say is like the biggest differentiator from how you built it versus how you had experienced it before? Like, is there at least one key takeaway where you're like, this was the big difference?
It's a number of small things that add up. I guess they're big things, but they seem really simple when you just look at it. And we did a lot of research to decide what we wanted to do. So one thing we did was we got rid of any kind of rating. Like, there will never be a rating. You'll never be like a 3 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5. The reviews are all just written essay style.
Okay.
That's kind of weird. It's kind of different. I've always, been a VE or a R4 or whatever
Right.
weird system that they'd come up with. But the research that we did showed that, ratings don't work. Everybody just gets the totally wrong impression out of them. And, managers don't ever really want to make somebody, like, say it's a 5-point scale. They don't really ever want to make somebody a 5.
Right.
So 5 becomes impossible. Why is it there? And you start to get into this conundrum.
And if you rate them a 1, then you got different problems.
Right, you got different problems.
Right.
So we got, we didn't do that. Secondly, doing it once a year is, I think, a big mistake. It just becomes this monolith at the end of the year.
Right.
And I think that's one reason why I dreaded it so much. So you would think if you dread something, that doing it more would be worse. But actually, I think it's better to do it quarterly.
Okay.
So every 3 months. So it's not meant to be this monolithic compendium of how the person's doing. It's supposed to be 3 months. We're just going to look at this 3-month window, and over time they just kind of layer on each other. So you're never like trying to bite it all off, and you really don't want these things to be these like massive investigations of people's, what they're doing. You want it to be somewhat quick. Like, people are busy, they have a lot going on. So it needs to be bite-sized enough. Like, ours is just like 4 or 5 questions in the review.
Got it.
And that's
it. I know a lot of the companies that we've been working with, and some of the more forward-thinking ones, have gone from annual to quarterly. And then I think the next step we've seen is they've disconnected the review from the raise process. So that was another thing that, like, for me at least, made it, I think, why everybody hated the review process. It's like, not only am I going through this review process, but it's directly related to a financial outcome, and I may be only coming in here to find out what the financial outcome is, or different situations. So I've seen them completely disconnect that. They're like, hey, here's our raise process, here's how it's outlined, here's how it works, here's our review process, it's quarterly, and we've separated the two, and now it's just fundamentally better.
That is what we are doing as well.
Okay.
Our Q4 review is actually going on right now until December 21st, when we go on holiday, and we're not doing any kind of raise as part of that. But when we get back from the break in mid-January, we'll have the raise discussions, and that's not a review or a check-in or here's how you're doing. It's like, here's the numbers, like, here's the compensation, and that's really it.
Pure financial
like,
conversation.
It's not in the same. Yeah, they're not in the same context. They're not coupled together. And so then you get to the point where it's like, well, what then is that raise based on, right?
And what conclusion did you come to for that one?
Okay, so
because this is always the fun part where the rubber meets the road on disconnecting the two.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. First of all, I hope I'm not. Mine might have been an isolated case, but when I was a manager, it was actually disconnected at the companies I was at too, but people didn't know that. Okay. That's the thing. Like, the employees were not aware of the fact that they were disconnected.
So you could have got a rave review, but not a great raise, or vice versa.
I mean, really, it was in the manager's head. You have a spreadsheet.
Right.
You have a budget for your people, and every time you plug in a number for person A, the budget comes down until it's zero. So you're tasked to spend the budget, and you spread it how you feel it should be spread. But a lot of times we were doing that before we wrote the reviews, because it had to get put in, and the reviews were still going, and we had a deadline for the other thing, but not for the review. So we had to get those budgets in, and managers were thinking of, so-and-so really should get a 4%, and so-and-so really should get a 2%, all based off what they felt in their gut at the time, because they didn't write anything at that point or see a self-evaluation.
Gotcha.
So that's not how exactly I would approach what we're doing. We are taking a really hard look at comp, and the number one thing you need for comp is data, which there are some organizations that have a whole sort of like department for comp strategy. We hired a company that has all the data and all the stuff and software, and so we were able to get all the data, all the market data for every job, and so then we could at least say, okay, we want everybody to be right in this range, this quartile to that quartile, somewhere in there, right? And basically we're looking at it through the lens of we're never going to be the highest paying company,
right?
But we want to compensate people fairly for their experience and for what they're doing, and the data allows us to see where, okay, it's off kilter, and that leaves us vulnerable. Like, if we truly value that employee, and we know we definitely got to keep that person, we got to make it so that nobody can come in and blow them away. Somebody can always come in and offer more money, but if they come in and blow them away.
But is it enough to leave is the question.
Yeah, is it enough to leave?
They can offer them a few thousand more, and if they like the company, they're going to stay, or vice versa, right? But if the delta's $20,000, it's going to be a little harder.
Right. It kind of puts that person getting the offer in an impossible position, because they may love working at launch, but how could they walk away from that money? Definitely. And so they just feel like they have to do it. But at least we can sort of take that off the table, and everybody's going to be living pretty comfortably, right? It's just a matter of we just try to keep to the market, right? Keep an eye on the market. And somebody who we know is performing really well, they're going to get a little more, and somebody who's performing not as well is going to get a little less, and that's going to be up to the managers to decide.
Got it.
But they'll at least have all the data to go
make
off
a good decision.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. So as far as company culture is concerned, kind of looking back through your history, what would you say, and again, you don't have to name any names, but what would you say was kind of the worst culture experience, and why?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the worst culture experiences that you end up with are things that are just kind of inevitable at any company, which are you make the wrong hire,
Yeah.
and then what are you going to do? Are you going to try to or maybe they're not the wrong hire, but it's just it's a person that is going to have to come a long way. It's going to take a lot of work to bring them around.
Were you in an organization that just like their hiring process just wasn't that good, and you felt like it just never went your way, or most of the time it didn't go your way? So, you never got the quite where you wanted to be with your colleagues, or got the colleagues you wanted in under your team, or anything like that? Is there some reason that stands out?
Well, when you're at a larger organization, and a lot of folks, they know who the sort of poor performers are. Yeah. And it kind of creates these little pockets of bad morale around those folks, because people don't, they feel like that their job is being made harder, perhaps. But a lot of times at a big company, those folks can like kind of slip through the cracks, Right. Or the bureaucracy of that company can make it almost impossible to let them go. You have to go through this like year-long process or something.
Right. Write them up and document,
right?
All kinds of things, right?
And those things are important. I don't, I think that there should be a process around it. You don't just like wake up one day and go, okay, it's not working out. But eventually, sometimes that decision has to be made, and it's for the best for that person and the company both. And when I say the company, I really mean the people at the company, that are there. So that can be tricky, but there is always that. It is a job. We are friends. We enjoy each other's company, but it is a job, and what you want is a group of people who aren't there to collect a paycheck. They're not there just because they're having a great time at work. They're actually just passionate about the discipline, that they would do it anyway, right? Yeah. If they didn't have to, like, let's say, work for a living,
what would they do?
What would they do? Would they still be doing that?
Yeah.
Or would they still want to be doing that? Would they be passionate about that discipline? As much as possible, can you have those kinds of people? Because, that kind of, no matter what the skill level is, that passion, that want to over that particular craft is going to drive everybody, so.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because we want everybody, as an entrepreneur, I love building companies. I love building the business. I work on it all the time, and everybody's like, oh, you work this many hours a week or that many. I'm like, I don't even count. It doesn't matter to me. I enjoy it. Right. And I want other people in our organization to enjoy what they do just as much. So I know, like, one of our values is all heart. And it's like, we want you to put your whole heart into it. We want you to love what you do so much that you want to show up every day because, you enjoy it. And so that all heart kind of comes into that around, just really, really enjoying every aspect of every day and what you're doing.
Right. And that's the thing, too, is like the core values of your company, the performance management system, whatever it is of your company, you cannot make somebody love what they do. Right. I mean, you just can't. Right. That has to be hired in. So I think the number one thing you've got to be looking for when you are recruiting is, does that person have that feeling? I mean, they don't have to be like, blind faith. They're just, this is all they care about. They eat, drink, and,
right.
whatever.
But that would be good.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I mean,
to an extent,
I guess things are still healthy in moderation, right?
Right.
You want work-life harmony. You want everybody to be able to spend lots of time with their family and not have to work crazy hours. And I don't work crazy hours, and I love what I do, but I don't have to work crazy hours to love it. I just try to put forth the best effort I have in 40 hours, and sometimes, I'll find myself working a little bit on Saturday or Sunday. It's just, maybe it's because I want to make my life a little easier on Monday or Tuesday, when I do that.
Right.
But yeah, you got to hire that in because, let's say somebody has that passion, but their skill level is still in its beginning stages or early in their career or whatever. You can coach skill
Right.
all day long, and even professionalism, but the passion for that craft is, you
Got to be there already.
It's got to be there.
Right. Definitely
Yeah.
got to be there. All right. Well, so last question. We talked a little bit. I usually ask about your biggest culture challenge now and what you're working on, but it sounds like you're working through a process already with your reviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, what is your favorite thing about the launch culture? So you got to build your own, right? It's on you now. What's your favorite part of that?
The thing that puts a sort of an extra jump in my step when I see it happening is when anybody at the company starts something new on their own. Like, it wasn't a management thing. It wasn't a management initiative. Just anybody at the company just starts something. So, we had a woman named Stacy, a young woman, and she started Launch Cares, which is now the pro bono arm of Launch. She just kind of recruited other coworkers around her and kind of formed a team. I mean, she did run it by us, but we're kind of yeah, sure, it's great. It's thank you for the respect of running it by me. I'm going to say yes.
Right. Yeah, make it happen.
Pretty much 99% of the time, anybody wants to do something a little different like that, we're going to say yes, of course.
And how do you balance
awesome.
out those items? I know Google was famed for 8 hour, 10 hours a week or whatever it was on a side thing. But how do you balance that out, right? I mean, in a small business or a non-Fortune 500, there can be some impacts to giving people that leeway. So I love the idea, but what have you found is kind of the best practice of making sure what needs to get done gets done, but also these other initiatives that should be done, get the right attention?
Well, we actually stole from Google when we were doing this research because they put their stuff online. All their whole process is on a website called, I think, Rework.
Rework?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Google that. But there's a book called Rework too. So, look for the Rework.
Okay.
That's the website, and they put every guide and everything they do, how managers are trained, how they do goals. Their goals are called OKRs.
Yep.
And we adopted OKRs, and we bought a piece of software that allows you to do OKRs and allows you to do the performance reviews. So everything's protected in the software. You don't have to worry about stumbling across somebody's review in
was that
Google Drive
5 or something else, or
was it?
What was the software y'all chose?
Lattice.
Lattice. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. We're always looking for new recommendations and tools to share.
Yeah. Lattice is great. I'll plug them right here. Works really well. Most important thing is it gets all the nuts and bolts logistics out of the way, so we can just focus on the critical thought, and not be fumbling around with templates and things.
Awesome.
So, OKRs are something we adopted, but the Launch Cares initiative. So how do we manage this stuff? Well, basically, one thing that Stacy told us was this is about finding the margins. So she's like, what can I do in the margins? We can't do the 8 hours a week thing that Google kind of mandated.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work that way. But as an agency, we have bench time, the dreaded, bench time. And a lot of, this causes a lot of consternation in agencies. We've got to have billability at 90%. And if somebody's at 60%, it's bad. What we say is if there's anybody at the company that's at 60%, it's not their fault. It's just that it so happens that the work didn't come right when we wanted it to. It's not perfect. So there is that available space. just naturally. So what we say is like form teams, and when you have some time, you're taking the baton, while your partners might be overwhelmed with they have a ton of work to do, right?
Right.
And then that's going to ebb and flow the other direction, and use your teamwork to manage that amongst each other, to like pass the baton back and forth to whoever is busy. And then we track that with the OKR system. So even so, like those OKRs have to come from the people there. We don't create OKRs for people.
Okay.
So another one that happened was one of our folks, Kelly and some others on the creative team, they created this goal around making sure people know about launch. Like, we're going to create a lot of awareness around launch. So they just started making these videos. And, they made a video about the art of hygge, which is like the Swedish comfort feeling.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, look that up. I think it's going to be big in culture now.
Okay.
And
here it was on the Epic Company Culture podcast,
right,
from David Preiss.
It's spelled Hygge, so in case you need to Google that.
Okay.
But they just started making these videos, and sometimes we didn't even know what they were doing. Like, they came out with like a Thanksgiving series and made all these claymation animals and made claymation videos of us talking about Thanksgiving, but as these claymation characters.
Right.
And then we put that up online. Just little things that maybe won't go viral, but are going to amuse people and maybe get a little more traction. But we're also having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
And we're showing people that we know how to make fun videos. Maybe that'll help launch down the line as well.
And they took the initiative, like you said, to go do something new and creative.
Absolutely. They took the initiative. And so that's the thing. Like, that's why I think culture is so important. A great culture is one that allows people to do things on their own. And then if you're a leader at that company, get out of the way and let them do it, but just enjoy the fruits of that, because you're not having to sit there alone in your office trying to figure out, like, okay, well, what are we going to do next? Right.
Pretty much everything.
It's just kind of happening. Right.
Definitely.
So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We really appreciate all the information. I'm sure the listeners got lots out of it.
I hope so.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Dave Preiss of Launch. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.